Just a month ago, most of us hadn't heard of ISIS. But now, after the gruesome beheadings of 2 American journalists and a British aid worker, the terror group is suddenly infamous. Last night, the United States and its Arab allies waged an all-out assault on ISIS, targeting more than a dozen sites, including the terrorist stronghold of Raqqa, Syria. The airstrikes also zeroed in on the al-Qaeda affiliate known as Khorasan Group, which the Pentagon believed was planning attacks against the United States. Today, the president touted the success of the international operation and made a point of saying he has the backing of congressional leaders, who he called prior to the strikes.
I've spoken to leaders in Congress, and I'm pleased that there is bipartisan support for the actions that we're taking. America is always stronger when we stand united, and that unity sends a powerful message to the world that we will do what's necessary to defend our country.
But giving congressional leaders advance notice of the strikes may not be enough, according to my next guest. Joseph Kennedy III represents the 4th Congressional District, which extends from the western suburbs of Boston to the South Coast. He was among the first members of Congress to call for congressional debate prior to military approval. Welcome to Greater Boston, Joe Kennedy.
Emily, thank you.
Your first appearance here. We've chased you around a little bit, but now here you are.
Spent a lot of time around the district, so thank you for having me.
Thanks
I appreciate
for coming.
it. Cool.
So you actually put out a statement today saying that you didn't think the president has gone far enough in having congressional debate over this. Are you saying there should be some kind of a vote in Congress?
I think so. First, Emily, the ISIL poses a very real threat to the region, to our interests in the region, our allies, and potentially, particularly if left unchecked, to the United States homeland. It's clear that they want to attack the U.S. The question then is how do we respond, and what authority do we have to respond? There's no doubt that we're going to need an international coalition that's humanitarian aid, that provides military support, and airstrikes are an important part of that. But I do think that if we're going to potentially get into a long and protracted military campaign that in another country against another terrorist group, that Congress has an obligation to give authorization to the president, and that we should vote on that authorization. If you're going to ask men and women in uniform and their families to shoulder the burden of another military conflict, then Congress at the very least should be asked to vote on that, and it's our duty to do so.
Well, doesn't the majority of Congress agree with you?
I would think so, but we still, that's why I think very clearly we need to actually have a discussion, a debate about an authorization for the use of military force, and that's a debate that we haven't had yet. We didn't vote on that last week, and it's something that I think before this goes any further, we need to actually have that vote.
You spent Labor Day in Central America. You wanted to know about why there was a mass migration to this country. There was a story I'm sure you saw on the front page of the Boston Globe today about a teenager who fled El Salvador. He didn't have the proper papers. The rest of his family did. The father said if the country deports him, it's going to be a death sentence for the kid. And basically, Immigration Services says they are going to deport him. What should happen?
There's, Emily, this very complex question that our government is wrestling with. And our trip down to Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, 7 members of Congress, 4 Republicans, 3 Democrats. We had done our homework beforehand, but I think all of us, and I don't want to speak for everybody in the group, but came away really concerned about the scope of the migration, but also the challenges that are facing folks on the ground in those countries, and the fact that there's no easy solution to this problem. The conditions in Honduras and El Salvador are dire. 90% of all homicides in Honduras go unprosecuted. Murder rate in this country is about 4.8 per 100,000. It's over 190 per 100,000 in parts of Honduras. The fact is that you've got a lack of economic opportunity. You've got a lack of governance and governing structures. You've got push factors, as they're called, that are pushing people to flee those countries and come to the United States. And we have to work with those host countries to try to come up with strategies that are going to increase enforcement, keep people in those communities, build up the ability of the judiciary to actually protect their citizens and prosecute offenders, and then we're here to clarify immigration policy.
Should we let this kid stay here?
What I think, look, if you've been in this country for a long time, you've been raised here, I think you should stay.
Gotta figure it out.
And I've been a strong supporter of deferred action and the DREAM Act, and I think that the fact that our policy at this point can't account for a child that has been raised in this country to stay here with his family, it goes against the very values that I think all of us believe in. On
to a couple of state issues, Joe. As you know, there's a couple of ballot questions. Yep. One has to do with the repeal of the gas tax. The other is the repeal of the casino bill. On the gas tax, Somerville Mayor Joe Curtatone and Paul Guzzi from the Chamber of Commerce were out today at one of the bridges in Somerville saying, you repeal this gas tax and the kind of infrastructure repair that needs bridges all over the state isn't going to happen. Is that true, do you think?
I think that, yes, I think that we need to, that gas tax was the result of a negotiation within our state legislature. It's been indexed to inflation. I think that it's an important part going forward, and that one of the key foundations that makes this state and our country competitive is to try to make sure that we make it as easy as we possibly can to get goods and people to their place of business to and around our state as quickly as we possibly can. Transportation infrastructure is a critical piece to that, and so we need to make that investment. I think we need to talk about it as an investment, though, and that's really what it is. So I think that repealing the gas tax.
You're voting no on that one. Okay.
I am.
What about the casino repeal bill? The proponents of repealing that bill seem to be losing some steam. They're way outfunded by the people who want to keep the casino bill as it is. What do you think should happen there?
Emily, it's an important issue, particularly for my district. We've got a number of potential sites for casinos in my district, and something that, in listening to my constituents, they certainly were behind the legislation to begin with, and so I'll be voting no on that as well. I think our legislature went through an exhaustive process to get to where they were and to get that bill passed. It's something that my constituents want, and I think that at this point we end up getting into the opportunity where you just start to muddle what our state policy is on major economic development issues. If you start passing one law, then repealing it, and then passing it and repealing it, you're basically putting ourselves in a de facto no. There's no way to make that type of long-term investment.
So you vote no on that one too?
I am.
I always have to translate for this.
Sorry. So yes, very clear. No and no.
Yeah, all right. So just 20 days after you were sworn into office, you were part of the House Foreign Affairs Committee hearings on the attacks in Benghazi, questioning then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. What was that like for you? I mean, here you are, a freshman congressman. I know you lobbed her a couple of softballs, but there you are, talking to the secretary about a very serious incident.
Very pointed questions, I'd like to think, but nevertheless. I think I asked her, if I remember correctly, as a Secretary of State, given her experience and unique experience in our history, and somebody who was on the last days of her time in office as Secretary of State, just to give us some advice as to, as a committee and getting ready for a new Congress, how can we support some of the long-term goals that our U.S. foreign policy should be built behind? And I think she came back with a couple of good examples. But one of the issues that I've really tried to dive into over my course of time on the committee is, yes, responding to these immediate threats. So Syria, Gaza, Iraq, Afghanistan, challenges throughout the Middle East, but also the longer-term threats that present themselves around the world. So we had a hearing about a year ago on Mali after an attempted coup. The median age in Mali is about 15.9. You look across Northern Africa, you've got 200 million people, and the average age is in their low teens, upper teens and low 20s. You're going to have 100 million people coming of age in the next decade with very little access to infrastructure, education, opportunity. And if we don't find a comprehensive way of trying to provide an alternative pathway to prosperity for 100 million people, there's alternative pathways there that I think could be very dangerous for a lot of us. And so taking a look at some of those long-term challenges as well, I think is critically important.
All right, on the governor's race, Martha Coakley, Charlie Baker.
Martha.
All right. Congressman Joe Kennedy.
Emily, thank you.
Pleasure to have you here.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.